December 1942, Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. The M3 Stuart light tank sat in the motor pool like a mechanical insult. Second Lieutenant James Parker stood beside it, watching his new crew inspect the vehicle with expressions ranging from disappointment to outright disgust. The tank weighed 14 tons. German Panzer IIIs weighed 23 tons. Panzer IVs weighed 25 tons. Parker's previous tank, an M4 Sherman, had weighed 33 tons with frontal armour, thick enough to stop most German rounds at combat range. This Stuart's maximum armour thickness was 51 millimetres. The Sherman's had been 76 millimetres. The Stuart's main gun was 37 millimetres. The Sherman mounted a 75 millimetre gun. The mathematics were brutal and obvious. Staff Sergeant William Chelmsford, d'Affimecu R4. Parker's gunner, transferred from a destroyed Sherman crew, ran his hand along the Stuart's turret. "Sir, this is what they're giving us." His voice carried the flat tone of a man trying not to say what he really thought. Parker had served with Chen for 8 months. 7 confirmed tank kills together. Now they were starting over in a vehicle the entire army called a death trap. Corporal Raymond Martinez, the driver, walked a complete circle around the Stuart, his boots scraping the North African dirt. It's fast, I'll give it that. 36 miles per hour on roads, but speed won't stop a 75 millimetre shell. Private First Class Douglas Webb, the loader, was youngest at 19, pulled from a replacement depot 3 days earlier. He stood near the rear deck, staring at the engine compartment. "How many rounds does she carry?" Parker answered, 103 rounds of 37 millimetre. Mix of armour-piercing and high explosive. British tankers had nicknamed the Stuart the Ronson after the cigarette lighter company's advertising slogan. Lights first time, every time. The joke was that Stuarts burned just as reliably when hit. Parker had seen 2 Stuarts brew up during the previous week's skirmishing near Tabourba. Both had been penetrated by Panzer IV guns at ranges exceeding 800 yards. The German crews probably hadn't even needed to aim carefully, just point and shoot. The Stuarts' crews had died in their tanks. German intelligence intercepts, translated and distributed to Allied units, included assessments of American armour. The Germans called the Stuart Blechbüchse, tin can. Their tankers were instructed to engage Stuarts with high explosive rounds rather than waste armour-piercing ammunition. High explosive was cheaper, more available, and perfectly adequate for punching through the Stuarts' thin armour. The reports were clinical in their dismissiveness. Parker had commanded a Sherman for 6 months before it took a Panzer IV round through the transmission during the fighting at Medjez el Bab. The hit had immobilized the tank but not penetrated the crew compartment. Parker and his crew had bailed out and watched from a ditch as German tanks methodically destroyed their abandoned Sherman, with 4 more hits. Then the reassignments came. New crews, new tanks. Parker got the Stuart. The demotion was unofficial but obvious. Sherman commanders were valuable, experienced, worth keeping in heavy armour. Apparently someone in logistics had decided Parker's 7 kills could be better utilised breaking in replacement crews on expendable light tanks. Or maybe there simply weren't enough Shermans to go around. The mission briefing came at 1600 hours in a tent that smelled of diesel fuel and stale cigarette smoke. Captain Robert Morrison, the company commander, stood beside a map of the Kasserine Pass approaches. 15 officers crowded the space, most commanding Shermans or M3 Lee medium tanks. Parker stood in the back with 3 other Stuart commanders. Morrison's briefing was direct. Intelligence indicates a German armoured column moving toward our positions from the west. Estimated strength is 15 to 20 tanks, mixed Panzer IIIs and IVs. They're retreating from El Alamein, but they're still combat effective. Our job is to hold these approaches and prevent them from breaking through to the supply depots at Tabessa. He tapped the map. We'll establish defensive positions along this ridgeline. Shermans take primary positions. Lees provide support. Stuarts will cover the flanks and provide reconnaissance. The dismissal was polite, but clear. The light tanks would watch from the sides, while the real fighting happened in the centre. Parker studied the map after the briefing ended, tracing terrain features with his finger. The ridgeline Morrison indicated offered good hull-down positions, places where a tank could hide its hull behind terrain and expose only its turret. Parker measured distances with the map scale. The open ground extending west from the ridgeline stretched approximately 2,400 yards. Multiple wadis, dry riverbeds, cut across the terrain. Rocky outcrops provided scattered cover. A competent German commander would use those features for concealment during his advance. Parker pulled out his notebook and began sketching fields of fire, calculating angles, marking positions where a fast, small tank might disappear and reappear without being tracked effectively by a slower opponent. Chen found Parker still studying the map an hour later. "Sir, you're not planning to sit on the flank, are you?" Parker looked up. "The Stuart can't trade shots with a Panzer, not at any range where the Panzer can shoot back." Chen nodded slowly. "So we don't trade shots." Parker tapped his sketch. "Tank combat isn't about armour, Sergeant. It's about geometry. The Panzer has better armour and a bigger gun, but we have speed and a lower profile. We can get to positions they can't reach as fast. We can shoot from angles they can't cover." Chen studied the sketch. "Shoot from the side," Parker continued, "or the rear, or from above if we can get elevation. Never frontal, never static. Fire, move, relocate. Make them guess where we'll appear." And next, Martinez joined them, carrying 4 canteens filled from the water truck. "We practiced this in training." Parker shook his head. "No. Training assumes you'll fight the way the manual says to fight. But the manual was written for tanks with enough armour to take hits." Webb appeared last, his face showing the uncertainty of a teenager who'd been in theatre for less than a week. "Sir, what if we can't get side shots? What if they pin us down?" Parker met his eyes. "Then we die. So we don't get pinned down." That night, Parker walked his crew through the plan beside their Stuart. The tank sat cold and dark under North African stars. He used a stick to draw diagrams in the dirt, showing how they'd use terrain to create engagement opportunities. "We load armour piercing only. No high explosive until I say otherwise. When we fire, we reverse immediately. Never fire twice from the same position. The second shot gives them time to acquire us, and one hit kills us." He drew more diagrams showing hull-down positions, reverse slope tactics, defilade angles. Chen asked the critical question. "The 37mm won't penetrate frontal armour at any range, will it?" Parker's answer was flat. "No, not reliably, so we don't shoot the front." Dawn came at 05:30 hours on December 18th. Parker's crew started the Stuart's radial engine at 05:45. The 7-cylinder Continental roared to life, settled into a steady rumble. They drove to their assigned position on the northern flank of the company line. The ridgeline stretched before them, rocky and uneven, offering dozens of hull-down positions within a 200-yard stretch. Parker positioned the Stuart behind the ridge crest with only the turret exposed. Chen checked his sight picture. Martinez tested the clutch and steering, confirming the tank could reverse quickly when needed. Webb arranged ammunition in the turret, placing armour-piercing rounds within easy reach. The radio crackled with reports. British Crusader tanks 3 miles north were engaging German reconnaissance elements. The main German column was moving. Parker glassed the western approaches through his periscope, scanning 2,400 yards of empty ground. At 0617 hours, he spotted the dust cloud. The Panzers were coming. The dust cloud materialized into shapes at 1,800 yards. Parker counted vehicle silhouettes through his periscope, marking each one mentally. 4 Panzers visible, probably more behind. The lead tank was a Panzer III, identifiable by its shorter gun barrel and characteristic cupola. It advanced at approximately 15 miles per hour, following a predictable path along what remained of an old caravan trail. Chen shifted in the gunner's seat, his eye pressed to the sight. His breathing was controlled, measured. Webb stood ready beside the breech, one hand resting on an armor-piercing round. Martinez's hands gripped the control sticks, knuckles white. The Stuart's engine idled quietly, a low rumble that vibrated through the hull. Parker watched the Panzer close the distance. 1,400 yards, 1,200. The German tank maintained its course, turret traversing slowly left and right as it scanned for threats. The commander's cupola hatch was open. Parker could see the dark shape of a head and shoulders. At 1,000 yards, the Panzer was still presenting frontal aspect. The Stuart's 37mm armor-piercing round had no chance against frontal armor at any range. Parker's hand rested on Chen's shoulder. The touch meant wait. Not yet. The crew had rehearsed this. Physical contact prevented premature firing when radio silence was critical. The Panzer reached 600 yards, still no shot. The angle was wrong. Parker made his decision. Driver, reverse 40 yards. Slow. Stop when I say. Martinez worked the controls with precise movements. The Stuart backed down the reverse slope, disappeared below the ridgeline crest. Parker counted seconds, watching through the periscope as the turret sank below the ridge. When only blackness filled his sight, he said, "Stop." The Stuart was now completely hidden from the advancing Panzer. Martinez shifted into neutral. The repositioning had changed the geometry. Parker moved to a different vision port and looked west. The Panzer was still advancing, now at 550 yards, but the angle had shifted 25 degrees. Side armor was visible. Parker's voice was calm. Target, Panzer III, side armor, 550. Chen adjusted his aim, cranking the turret traverse. The electric motor whined softly. The crosshairs settled on the Panzer's hull just behind the turret ring where armor was thinnest. Chen's hand found the trigger. Identified, Parker said. Fire when ready. Chen's breathing stopped. His finger squeezed. The 37mm gun cracked, a sharp report that echoed across the desert. The recoil rocked the Stuart backward 6 inches. Through the periscope, Parker saw the tracer arc across the gap. The round struck exactly where Chen had aimed. The Panzer jerked, stopped. Smoke began curling from the engine deck. The cupola hatch banged open. German crew members tumbled out, running. Parker counted seconds. Driver, reverse 80 yards, north along the ridge. Martinez didn't hesitate. The Stuart's engine roared. They moved before the smoke from their own gun had cleared. 2 more Panzers emerged from the dust, spreading their formation. One was a Panzer IV, distinguishable by its longer 75mm gun and bulkier profile. The IV took a hull-down position 800 yards out. Smart tactics from an experienced crew. Only its turret was visible above a low rise. The second Panzer III continued advancing, its commander more aggressive or less experienced. Parker watched the 3 move forward, turret traversing, searching for the Stuart that had killed its companion. At 400 yards, the Panzer III passed the Stuart's position without seeing them. The ridgeline hid the Stuart completely. The German tank was focused on the area where the shot had originated, not realizing Parker had relocated. Parker watched the Panzer III move past. At 380 yards, it presented a perfect rear quarter view. Driver, reverse over the crest, gun only. Martinez backed the Stuart up the ridge slope until only the 37mm gun cleared the crest. The hull remained hidden. The Panzer III was now 380 yards away, rear armor exposed, completely unaware. Chen had already traversed onto target. "Rear armor, lower hull," Parker said. "Fire!" The 37mm cracked again. The round punched through the Panzer's thin rear plate into the engine compartment. Fire erupted immediately. The Panzer III lurched forward 3 feet and stopped. Flames spread quickly. Martinez reversed the Stuart back down before the Panzer IV could acquire their position. The hull-down Panzer IV began moving, attempting to flank toward the Stuart's suspected location. Parker had anticipated this. German doctrine emphasized flanking maneuvers against dug-in defenders. "Driver, hard reverse, 200 yards, north side of ridge." The Stuart raced backward, Martinez steering by, glancing over his shoulder through the open hatch. 45 seconds of movement while the Panzer IV advanced. Parker counted the time, calculating when the German tank would reach the small rise that would expose its underside. The Stuart stopped in a new position. Parker glassed westward. The Panzer IV was climbing the rise, exactly as predicted. For 3 seconds, the tank's belly armor was visible, the thinnest armor on any tank. "Belly shot, 420 yards, fire!" Chen's round caught the Panzer IV crossing the apex. The 37mm penetrated the thin underbelly plate. The Panzer stopped instantly. Its turret hatch blew open from internal pressure. Flame shot 15 feet into the air. The ammunition had cooked off. Parker's radio speaker crackled with German voices, transmissions from the attacking column. The Stuart carried a radio operator who translated intermittently. "Sir, they're saying they have something new, fast, invisible." The Germans didn't understand what was killing them. They expected American tanks to fight the way Shermans fought, static positions exchanging shots until superior German guns won through attrition. The Stuart was fighting a different war. Parker checked his watch. 28 minutes since first contact. 3 Panzers destroyed. 0 hits taken. Webb reported ammunition status. 14 rounds fired, 89 remaining. Chen's voice held a note of disbelief. "Sir, they still don't know where we are." Parker studied the battlefield through his periscope. 8 more Panzers were visible now, forming a line 1,200 yards out. The German commander was adapting, consolidating his force for a concentrated advance. Individual tanks could be picked off. A coordinated assault would be harder to counter. The Germans were learning. Parker watched them organize. The next phase would be more difficult. The element of surprise was gone. Now, they knew something was killing them from unexpected angles. They would advance more cautiously, cover each other's flanks, limit their exposure. Parker pulled out his map and studied the terrain between his position and the German line. Multiple wadis cut through the open ground, deep enough to hide a tank. The rocky outcrops he'd noted earlier offered cover and concealment. Speed and unpredictability had worked for 3 kills. The next engagements would require different tactics. The German line began moving forward at 06:45 hours. 8 Panzers advancing together, spacing themselves 40 yards apart for mutual support. Parker made his decision. Fighting from static positions against 8 tanks would get them killed. The Stuart's advantage was mobility. Time to use it. "Driver, full speed, parallel to their line, 800 yards out." Martinez looked back. "Sir, that puts us in the open." Parker nodded. "That's the point. We need them confused, not coordinated." Chen understood immediately. "We're bait," Parker corrected him. "We're chaos." The Stuart broke from cover at full speed, engines screaming. Martinez pushed the tank to 36 miles per hour across open ground, parallel to the German line at 800 yards distance. Parker stood in the cupola, wind whipping his face, watching 8 Panzer turrets traverse toward them. The movement was sudden, unexpected. German gunners struggled to track a target moving perpendicular at high speed. The first Panzer fired. The 75mm shell impacted 40 yards behind the Stuart, kicking up a geyser of dirt and rock. The German gunner had aimed where the Stuart was, not where it would be. The second shot landed 30 yards behind. Still wrong. Lead calculations for moving targets required practice and judgment. The Germans were firing too quickly, not compensating enough for the Stuart's speed. Chen fired the 37mm on the move. Accuracy was impossible at this speed over rough terrain, but accuracy wasn't the goal. The psychological effect was what mattered. The Stuart was shooting back while running, aggressive behaviour that contradicted everything German tankers expected from a light tank. Another round hit dirt 25 yards behind them, getting closer. The Germans were adjusting. Parker counted 6 Panzers firing now. Shells bracketed the Stuart, close enough that Martinez flinched each time one landed. A near miss threw shrapnel against the Stuart's side armour. The pinging sound was loud inside the turret. Webb ducked instinctively. Parker remained standing, watching. One more shot from Chen. Fired blind. Struck something. Parker saw the impact through binoculars. A Panzer III on the left end of the German line jerked. Its left track separated, torn by the lucky hit. The tank slewed sideways, immobilized. "Driver, Waddy! 200 yards now!" Martinez saw it, a dry riverbed cutting across their path. He turned hard, the Stuart's tracks throwing up twin dust trails. They disappeared into the Wadi 8 seconds. Later. The depression was 8 feet deep, 30 yards wide, with steep banks. Above ground, the Germans lost sight of their target. Radio chatter erupted in German. The translator's voice came through Parker's headset. "They lost visual contact. They're confused." The Wadi snaked east to west, offering concealment and a route back toward the German line. Parker made his decision instantly. "Driver, west, follow the Wadi toward them." Martinez understood. The terrain that hid them from the Germans also hid the Germans from them until the last second. They could close distance without being tracked. The Stuart raced through the Wadi at 20 miles per hour, the safest speed on the uneven ground. Parker watched through his periscope for side channels, places where the Wadi branched. At 400 yards from the immobilized Panzer, he found one, a smaller Wadi splitting north. "Hard right." The Stuart turned, climbed the bank slightly for a sightline. The immobilized Panzer III was 340 yards away, side armour exposed, crew still inside trying to repair the track. Chen had a stationary target. "Take your time, make it count." The 37mm fired. The round penetrated the Panzer's turret. Secondary explosions followed, ammunition cooking off. The German crew never made it out. Parker didn't watch. "Driver, back in the Wadi, west, keep moving." 2 Panzer IIIs pursued into the Wadi. Parker heard them before he saw them, engine noise echoing off the Wadi walls. The German commanders had made a mistake. In confined terrain, the Stuart's advantages multiplied. Tighter turning radius, faster acceleration, better visibility from the lower cupola height. The lead Panzer appeared around a bend 25 yards behind the Stuart. Too close. Its 50mm gun couldn't depress enough to target the Stuart at this range in the depression. Parker's response was immediate. "Driver, full brake, hard right, side channel." Martinez executed perfectly. The Stuart stopped, turned 90 degrees right into a narrow branch of the Wadi. The Panzer III couldn't stop fast enough. It overshot the turn, its momentum carrying it forward. The Stuart was now behind the Panzer at 45 yards range. Perfect rear shot. Chen fired without waiting for orders. The 37mm round punched through the Panzer's rear armour into the engine compartment. Fire spread instantly. The German crew bailed out through hatches, running. The 2nd Panzer III saw what happened and tried reversing out of the wadi. Reversing was slow, maybe 5 miles per hour. The Panzer presented its side armor while backing up. Parker gave Chen the range. 60 yards, side armor, fire. The shot hit the Panzer's lower hull, destroying the drive sprocket. The tank stopped, immobile. Chen put a second round into the stationary target. The crew abandoned the vehicle before fire reached the ammunition. 6 Panzers destroyed. Parker checked his watch. 53 minutes of combat. Webb reported ammunition. 68 rounds left. The Stuart climbed out of the wadi on the north side, emerging into open terrain again. 5 German Panzers remained visible, now consolidated in a defensive cluster 900 yards distant. They'd stopped advancing. The aggressive push had cost them half their force. Now they were cautious, protecting each other, limiting exposure. Parker studied them through binoculars. Hull-down positions, overlapping fields of fire, smart spacing. A stalemate. The Stuart couldn't engage effectively at 900 yards. The 37mm accuracy degraded past 500 yards. The Germans wouldn't advance into another ambush. Time became the variable. Parker checked his watch again. 18 minutes passed with neither side moving. The Stuart sat behind a rocky outcrop, invisible to the Germans. Chen shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the waiting. Martinez drank from his canteen. Webb arranged and rearranged ammunition that didn't need arranging. At 06:58 hours, the German radio traffic changed. The translator's voice came through. "Sir, they're receiving orders from higher command. They're being ordered to advance regardless of losses. They have a timetable." Parker understood immediately. The Germans weren't fighting for this ground. They were retreating from larger battles to the east. Delays cost them escape routes and supply. They had to push through regardless of casualties. The defensive cluster began moving at 07:01. 5 Panzers advancing slowly, carefully, maintaining formation. 1 Panzer IV separated slightly as terrain forced it around a boulder field. The gap was 15 yards initially. Terrain widened it to 30 yards. Parker saw the opportunity. The isolated Panzer IV was 620 yards out, side exposure increasing as it navigated the obstacles. "Driver, move to the outcrop, hull down position." The Stuart repositioned, exposing only the turret. Chen traversed onto the separated Panzer IV. The range was long for the 37mm, but the target was moving slowly, predictably. 620 yards, side armor, led him 2 lengths. Chen made his adjustments, calculating the target's movement speed, compensating for distance. He fired. The round struck the Panzer IV's track assembly. The track separated, wrapped around the drive sprocket. The Panzer stopped, mobility kill. Before the other 4 Panzers could react, Parker ordered relocation. "Driver, reverse, new position, 80 yards south." The Stuart disappeared behind the outcrop. They moved and set up again in 12 seconds. The immobilized Panzer IV was now at 640 yards, a stationary target. Chen's second shot hit the turret ring. Penetration. Fire started in the engine deck. 7 Panzers destroyed. 4 German tanks remained. Parker studied them through his periscope, analyzing their formation, their spacing, their positioning. These crews had watched 7 tanks die. They were the survivors, the most experienced, the most careful. They would be harder to kill. The Germans reformed their line, closing gaps, moving with deliberate coordination. Parker recognized quality when he saw it. These weren't replacement crews or inexperienced conscripts. These were veterans who understood their tanks, understood tactics, understood that one mistake meant death. The next engagements would require perfect execution. The margin for error had disappeared. One German shell connecting with the Stuart would end everything. Parker's crew knew it. The atmosphere inside the turret changed. Less confidence, More tension. Chen's hands shook slightly when he adjusted the gun controls. Martinez's breathing was audible over the intercom. Webb's movements became jerky, nervous. Parker kept his voice steady. "We've killed 7. We can kill 4 more. Stay focused. Trust your training." The 4 remaining Panzers executed their assault with precision that spoke of battlefield experience. 2 tanks advanced directly toward the Stuart's last known position, while the other 2 swung wide in a flanking maneuver. The coordination was perfect, textbook German armor tactics. Parker recognized the trap immediately. If he stayed, the flankers would catch him in crossfire. If he moved, the advancing tanks would track his movement and concentrate fire. He had 3 seconds to decide. Driver, full speed, northeast, serpentine pattern. Martinez understood. He pushed the Stuart to maximum speed and began weaving, changing direction every 4 seconds. Unpredictable movement was their only defense against multiple shooters. The first 75mm shell landed 10 yards to the left, close enough that the concussion wave rocked the Stuart. Martinez jerked the controls right. Another shell impacted 15 yards behind them. The Germans were trying to bracket their target, walking fire onto the moving tank. A third round hit ground 8 yards to the right. Shrapnel pinged off the Stuart's side armor like hail on a tin roof. Webb flinched, covering his head with his arms. Chen gripped his gun controls, unable to aim while the tank bucked and swerved across rough terrain. Parker stood in the cupola, binoculars pressed to his eyes, tracking the German positions. Another shell, this one landing 3 yards from the left track. The explosion threw dirt over the Stuart's deck. Fragments hit Parker's helmet with sharp metallic cracks. Martinez maintained the serpentine pattern, his hands moving constantly on the controls. 32 miles per hour over broken ground, turning every few seconds, the Stuart's suspension absorbing punishment it wasn't designed for. Parker saw the depression 200 yards northeast, dead ground where the terrain dipped below the surrounding desert floor. "Driver, depression, straight ahead, don't slow down." Martinez aimed for it. 2 more shells landed, one 20 yards behind, one 15 yards to the right. The Germans were adjusting their fire, getting the range. The Stuart reached the depression and plunged into it, disappearing from German line of sight. Martinez braked hard, throwing everyone forward. They were in a natural bowl, 8 feet below the surrounding terrain, maybe 60 yards across, safe for the moment. Shells continued landing around the depression's edges, the Germans firing at where they thought the Stuart might emerge. Parker assessed his crew. Martinez's hands were cramping, fingers locked in a claw shape from gripping the controls. Chen's left ear was bleeding, eardrum damaged from a near-miss concussion. Webb was shaking, his breath coming in short gasps. Parker's own hands were steady, but his heart hammered against his ribs. They'd been in continuous combat for over an hour. Adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by fatigue and fear. Webb reported ammunition count with a trembling voice. 54 rounds left. Parker allowed them 15 seconds. Drink water. Check your equipment. He used the time to study the terrain through his periscope. The Germans would expect them to retreat east, away from the threat. Moving toward the enemy would be unexpected. "We're going west, toward them." Chen turned to look at Parker, disbelief clear on his face. Martinez said nothing, waiting for orders. Webb's shaking intensified. Parker explained quickly. "They're watching for us to run. We're going to charge." The logic was sound, even if the instinct rebelled against it. At close range, German advantages in armour and firepower diminished. The Stuart's speed and manoeuvrability would matter more. Parker gave them 5 seconds to process. "Driver, reverse slope on the west side. Fast climb. Get us over and down before they react." Martinez nodded once. The Stuart's engine roared. They climbed the depression's western slope at 28 miles per hour. The Stuart crested the rise and immediately dropped down the far side, presenting a target for less than 2 seconds. In that brief window, Parker saw the German formation. 4 Panzers spread across 400 yards, all oriented east, expecting the Stuart to flee. Instead, the Stuart was now 700 yards behind their line, approaching from the rear. The Germans didn't react immediately. The speed of the Stuart's appearance and disappearance left them uncertain. Parker used their confusion. "Driver, straight at them! Maximum speed!" The Stuart accelerated toward the German tanks. Distance closed rapidly. 600 yards. 550. The Germans were turning their turrets, but turret traverse took time. The electric motors that rotated German turrets moved at 6 degrees per second. Turning 180 degrees required 30 seconds. The Stuart needed 20 seconds to close from 700 yards to 400 yards. German gunners fired while still traversing, shots taken before proper aim was achieved. Shells passed over the Stuart's turret, the Germans calculating lead for a retreating target, but facing an advancing one. Their muscle memory and training worked against them. At 500 yards, the Stuart presented a frontal aspect, smaller than a side view, harder to hit. At 400 yards, Parker found what he'd been looking for. The terrain rose slightly, giving the Stuart a 3-degree elevation advantage. 3 degrees was enough. "Driver, stop on the rise." Martinez braked. The Stuart settled. From their elevated position, they could see down into the nearest Panzer IV. Top armour, the thinnest plate on any tank, was exposed. 8 millimeters of steel, designed only to protect against artillery fragments, not direct fire. Chen had the shot. 420 yards, looking down at a Panzer's engine deck. Top armour, centre mass, fire. The 37-meter armour-piercing round angled downward, struck the Panzer IV's top plate, penetrated. The explosion inside was immediate and catastrophic. Ammunition stored in the hull detonated. The turret lifted 6 inches off its ring and fell back askew. 8 Panzers destroyed. But the Stuart was now exposed at point-blank range to 3 remaining German tanks. Their turrets had completed traverse. 3 75mm and 50mm guns were oriented on the Stuart. Parker had 1 second to save his crew. "Smoke! Driver! Hard left! Move!" Webb grabbed smoke grenades from the rack, pulled pins, threw them out the loader's hatch. White phosphorus erupted, creating an instant screen between the Stuart and the Germans. Martinez turned hard left, accelerating. German guns fired into the smoke, blind shooting at where they thought the Stuart should be. Shells passed through empty air. The Stuart emerged from the smoke screen 140 yards north of where it had entered, moving perpendicular to German expectations. 12 seconds of concealment had been enough. The Germans were still searching the smoke when the Stuart reached a cluster of rocks and disappeared behind them. Parker allowed himself 1 full breath. They'd survived the closest call yet. Chen spotted the next target without Parker's direction. A Panzer III. Commander had made a fatal mistake, standing up in his cupola to see over the smoke, looking for the Stuart. The exposure gave Chen a clear target through a gap in the rocks. 480 yards, the Panzer III, turning broadside as it manoeuvred for a better angle. "I've got one, sir. Side shot." Parker saw it too. "Your shot. Take it." Chen's hands were steadier now, muscle memory overriding fear. His breathing slowed. Trigger squeeze was smooth. The 37mm fired. The round hit the Panzer III's side turret, penetrated, found something vital inside. The tank stopped moving. Smoke poured from every hatch. The crew bailed out, 2 men on fire. Chen had just made his first independent kill of the engagement. 9 Panzers destroyed. 2 remained. Parker checked his watch. 71 minutes since first contact. Webb's voice cracked when he reported ammunition. 47 rounds. The two surviving Panzers pulled back, creating distance, taking defensive positions 600 yards away. One Panzer IV, one Panzer III, the most dangerous and most experienced crews left. They'd watched 9 tanks die and learned from each death. They wouldn't make the mistakes their companions had made. Parker studied them through his periscope, seeing the intelligence in their positioning, the way they covered each other's blind spots. These final two would be the hardest kills of all. The Panzer IV and Panzer IIIs held position at 100 yards, hull down behind a low ridge. Parker glassed them through his periscope, studying their placement. The spacing was perfect, 40 yards between tanks, close enough for mutual support, but far enough that a single attack couldn't threaten both simultaneously. The Panzer IV commander had positioned his tank to cover the Panzer III's vulnerable side. The Panzer III covered the IV's rear approach. Textbook defensive tactics from a crew that understood armour warfare. At this range, the Stuart's 37mm had minimal penetration capability even against side armour. The Germans knew it. They were daring Parker to close distance or withdraw. Parker chose neither option. 73 minutes of continuous combat had taken its toll on the crew. Martinez's hands trembled on the controls, muscles fatigued from constant manoeuvring. Chen's damaged ear leaked blood down his neck, his spatial awareness compromised. Webb's arms shook from loading 56 rounds, the repetitive motion causing muscle failure. Parker's own body ached, his throat raw from shouting commands over engine noise and gunfire. The canteens were empty. Sweat soaked their uniforms despite the December temperature. Webb counted ammunition again, a nervous habit. 42 rounds. The number was adequate, but no longer comfortable. Every shot now mattered. Parker checked his watch. 0712 hours. The engagement had consumed the morning. Radio chatter indicated British Crusaders were still engaged 2 miles north. No reinforcements were coming. This fight would end with the Stuart crew alone. The stalemate extended. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. 15. Neither side moved. The Germans had orders to advance, but also had survival instincts. They'd watched 9 tanks burn. Caution was warranted. Parker understood their calculation. If they waited long enough, the Stuart might withdraw or run out of ammunition. If they advanced, they risked becoming victim number 10 and 11. At 18 minutes, Parker made his decision. Driver, zigzag advance, slow, 20 yards, stop, 20 more, stop. Martinez understood the plan. Make the Germans think the Stuart was probing, testing their response, looking for weakness. The Stuart moved forward in short bounds, never presenting a target for more than 3 seconds. At each stop, Chen aimed but didn't fire. The appearance of aggression without commitment. The Germans held fire. Professional discipline. They wouldn't waste ammunition on a target outside effective range. Parker continued the pattern. The Stuart closed to 900 yards. Still no German response. 800 yards. The Panzers remained motionless. At 700 yards, Parker stopped the advance. The Stuart went completely still, hull down behind a small rise. 30 seconds of absolute silence. No movement, no engine noise, nothing. Martinez had shut down the engine. The sudden quiet was unnerving after the constant roar of combat. Chen kept his eye to the sight, watching for German reaction. Nothing. Another 30 seconds. The Germans were waiting, demonstrating patience that matched Parker's own. Parker recognized quality opponents. These crews wouldn't make impulsive mistakes. Radio traffic crackled. The translator's voice came through Parker's headset. Sir, German High Command is ordering withdrawal from this sector. All units to fall back to secondary positions. Parker processed the information instantly. The Panzers had orders to retreat. They could disengage, fall back, avoid further combat. But to retreat, they had to move. Movement meant exposure. Parker watched through his periscope. At 0703, the Panzer IV began backing up, maintaining its hull-down position while withdrawing. The Panzer III covered the IV's movement, turret oriented toward the Stuart. Standard bounding overwatch, one tank moving while the other provided security. Professional execution. Parker saw his opportunity not in attacking the moving tank, but in predicting where it would go. The terrain behind the German position channeled movement. A rocky area to the north forced vehicles south. A steep embankment to the south forced movement through a narrow gap. The Panzer IV had to pass through a 40-yard bottleneck. Parker knew the ground. He'd studied the map. Driver, start engine, full speed, intercept course, northeast. Martinez fired up the Continental engine. The Stuart accelerated, not toward the Germans, but toward the position they would have to occupy during their withdrawal. A race. The Panzer IV backing up at 8 miles per hour. The Stuart advancing at 34 miles per hour. Geometry and speed versus caution and firepower. The Stuart reached the bottleneck first, 12 seconds ahead of the Panzer IV. Parker positioned the tank in defilade behind a cluster of large rocks, perfect ambush position. The Panzer IV entered the gap, committed to the narrow passage, both flanks exposed by terrain. The German commander realized the trap too late. His turret began traversing toward the Stuart's position. 380 yards separated the tanks. Chen already had the shot, side armor fully exposed, the Panzer forced by terrain into perfect vulnerability. The German gunner was fast, professional, tracking onto target with smooth precision. Both tanks acquiring simultaneously. Parker's voice was steady. Wait for it. Let him turn. The Panzer's 75mm gun swung toward them. 20 degrees of traverse, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, almost aligned. Chen's finger rested on the trigger, pressure building but not releasing. 45 degrees. The German gun was nearly on target. Parker's hand squeezed Chen's shoulder. Fire. The 37mm cracked. The Panzer's 75mm fired simultaneously, less than half a second separating the shots. Chen's round struck first, hitting the Panzer IV's side turret, penetrating into the crew compartment. The German gunner died at his station, his hand still on the trigger as his shot went high by 18 inches. The 75mm shell passed over the Stuart's turret close enough that Parker felt the displacement of air. The round impacted rock behind them, fragments rattling off the Stuart's rear deck. The Panzer IV stopped, smoke pouring from hatches. Crew members tried to bail, but only one made it out before internal fire reached ammunition storage. 10 Panzers destroyed. The final Panzer III faced a choice. Continue covering the IV's withdrawal of a tank that was now burning, or save itself. The German commander chose survival. He began backing up, trying to maintain turret orientation on the Stuart while retreating. Parker's crew was faster. Driver, hard reverse, get us behind the rocks, then north, flank him. Martinez executed, the Stuart disappearing from the Panzer III's sightline. They circled north through dead ground, using terrain, the same way they'd used it all morning. 70 seconds of movement brought them to the Panzer III's flank. The German tank was still backing up, still oriented on where the Stuart had been, not where it was now. Chen had an unobstructed side shot at 420 yards. The Panzer III's commander saw the Stuart at the last moment, tried to traverse, too late. Side armor, fire. The 37mm round penetrated the Panzer III's hull, struck something critical. The tank stopped immediately, slewing sideways as one track locked. Secondary explosions followed. 11 Panzers destroyed. Parker checked his watch. 0717 hours, 15 minutes and 22 seconds since the first kill. 11 German tanks eliminated by a single Stuart that the entire army had called useless. Silence settled over the battlefield. No more engine noise except their own. No more radio traffic. Just the crackling of fires from 11 burning Panzers spread across a square mile of Tunisian desert. Chen sat back from his gun sight, hands shaking violently now that the engagement was over. Martinez's head dropped forward, exhausted. Webb counted through heavy breaths. 56 rounds fired, 11 confirmed kills. Parker climbed out of the cupola, stood on the turret, looked across the devastation. Smoke columns marked each kill. His crew had done the impossible, with a tank everyone said couldn't fight Panzers. Parker keyed his radio. "Command, this is Parker. 11 enemy tanks destroyed, 1 friendly operational." 3 hours after the shooting stopped, a British armoured column arrived at the battlefield. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Harding climbed out of his command tank and walked among the wreckage, counting destroyed Panzers with visible disbelief. His adjutant followed with a notebook, documenting each kill. Panzer III at grid reference 2347, turret penetration. Panzer IV at 2351, top armour penetration. Another Panzer III at 2349, rear engine compartment hit. Harding stopped at the 7th wreck, bent down to examine the impact hole. 37mm caliber, unmistakable. He looked back at Parker's Stuart sitting 400 yards away, the only Allied tank in the area. The mathematics didn't make sense. 1 light tank, 11 heavy kills, 0 friendly losses. Harding walked to the Stuart where Parker's crew sat on the engine deck, passing water canteens from a British supply truck. Chen's ear had been bandaged by a medic. Martinez's hands were wrapped in gauze where blisters had torn open. Webb looked 20 years older than his 19 years. Parker stood when Harding approached, came to attention despite exhaustion. Harding waved off the formality. "Lieutenant, I need to understand what happened here. My intelligence officer says you engaged a German armoured column alone." Parker's voice was hoarse. "Yes, sir. 11 Panzers, mixed 3s and 4s. Engagement lasted approximately 15 minutes. Harding looked at Parker, then at the Stuart, then back at the burning Panzers. 15 minutes, 11 tanks, with a 37mm gun. Parker nodded. "Yes, sir." The interrogation lasted 40 minutes. Harding's adjutant took notes while Parker walked them through the engagement, explaining each kill, the tactics used, the geometry that made penetration possible despite the Stuart's weak gun. Harding interrupted frequently with technical questions. "How did you penetrate frontal armour?" "We didn't. We shot sides and rear." "How did you avoid return fire?" "We never stayed in one position." "How did you track multiple targets?" "We didn't. We isolated them." When Parker finished, Harding stood silent for 30 seconds. "Lieutenant, I've commanded armour for 8 years. I've never seen anything like this." He turned to his adjutant. "Get division headquarters on the radio. I want this crew recommended for decorations immediately." The physical evidence was irrefutable. 11 destroyed German tanks spread across 2.4 square kilometres, all with 37mm impact holes at angles indicating a single attacker using terrain for advantage. Harding's intelligence officer interviewed the Stuart crew separately, comparing accounts for consistency. Chen described the gunnery, the sight pictures, the Kentucky windage calculations. Martinez explained the driving, the constant repositioning, the serpentine patterns under fire. Webb recounted the ammunition loading, the pace of fire, the round counts. Every account matched. The ballistics told their own story. 56 rounds fired from the Stuart's 37mm gun. 11 confirmed penetrations resulting in catastrophic kills. 5 additional hits causing mobility kills or mission kills. 19.6% hit rate under combat conditions against moving, shooting targets. Professional performance by any standard. German prisoners interrogated later that week corroborated the American account. A Panzer III driver who had bailed from his burning tank described a ghost that appeared from nowhere, fired once, disappeared. A Panzer IV commander who survived described tactical discipline beyond what he expected from American crews. The Germans had been trained to view American armor as inferior in equipment and skill. The Stuart crew's performance contradicted that assessment completely. German after-action reports captured weeks later included warnings about American light tanks using unconventional tactics, advising increased caution and modified engagement procedures. Parker received the Silver Star 3 weeks later at a ceremony attended by 24 officers. His citation read, "For gallantry in action against an enemy of the United States." The brevity understated what had happened. Chen, Martinez, and Webb received Bronze Stars. The Stuart itself received a nickname painted on the turret by an appreciative motor pool sergeant. Goliath Killer in white letters 3 inches tall. The name stuck. Other Stuart crews heard the story, began requesting tactical briefings from Parker. He spent 2 days teaching mobility doctrine, fire discipline, terrain exploitation. His methods became part of informal training, passed from crew to crew throughout the North African campaign. The War Department requested Parker's after-action report for analysis. Armour School at Fort Knox received a copy with instructions to incorporate lessons learned. The key findings focused on asymmetric advantages. The Stuart couldn't match German tanks in direct combat, but properly employed could achieve devastating results. Speed enabled positioning. Terrain enabled protection. Fire discipline enabled survival. The combination transformed a wheat tank into an effective killer. Tank combat wasn't artillery, wasn't about standing and trading shots. It was geometry, angles, timing. Parker's engagement proved the principle absolutely. The Stuart that killed 11 Panzers continued fighting through Tunisia, Sicily, and into Italy. Parker remained its commander for another 18 months. The crew rotated as casualties and transfers occurred, but the tank survived. Its final kill count reached 27 confirmed enemy armour destructions before a German Panzerfaust team caught it in the Italian village street in December 1943. The hollow charge warhead penetrated the thin side armour, destroyed the transmission, immobilised the Stuart. Parker's crew bailed out under machine gun fire. All 4 survived. Parker's 4th tank lost to enemy action. The wreck was salvaged after the war, shipped back to Britain, eventually restored, and placed in the Tank Museum at Bovington, where it remains today. Parker rotated back to the United States in early 1944, promoted to captain, assigned to Fort Benning as an instructor. He taught armour tactics to replacement crews heading overseas, emphasising the lessons learned in Tunisia. Don't fight the enemy's fight. Use terrain. Move constantly. Shoot from advantage. His students carried those lessons to France, Germany, the Pacific. Some survived because of what Parker taught them. In 1958, Parker published a technical manual on light armour tactics. The book became required reading at armour schools in the United States and Britain. Military historians still reference it when discussing asymmetric warfare principles. Parker died in 1989 at age 74, outliving Chen and Martinez by 15 years, Webb by 8. His obituary in Army Times mentioned the Tunisia engagement in 2 sentences. Younger officers who read it couldn't grasp the significance. 11 tanks in 15 minutes seemed impossible, probably exaggerated. But the records existed, preserved in National Archives boxes. After-action reports, British intelligence assessments, German prisoner interrogations, all confirming the same impossible story. 1 Stuart crew, 4 men, demonstrating that tactical skill could overcome material disadvantage. The tank they called useless had proven lethal in the right hands. The weapon dismissed as inadequate had killed 11 Panzers through geometry, speed and courage. Parker's crew had fought perfectly for 15 minutes and changed how the American army understood light armor warfare. The mockery ended on a Tunisian battlefield where a despised tank became legendary, where 4 men proved that wars aren't won by the biggest guns but by the smartest crews, where a Stuart light tank earned its place in history by doing the impossible and surviving to tell about it.